This video is brought to you by friend of the channel Squarespace. Stick around to learn more about them, as well as a special offer they're making available through my channel. Gamers, this episode is dedicated in loving memory of Nibel. He's not dead, but he has gone to a better place. Off Twitter. If you haven't heard of Nibel before, then you're probably one of the lucky ones who don't frequent the hellscape known as the Bird app. Nibel was one of the best people to follow on that cursed website, very much on top of the latest breaking news, sifting through it all to curate a feed that would reliably bring you the most important stuff, often before the media themselves had spotted it. Everyone who covered games followed Nibel, and his account served as a sort of town hall within which a great many game events were discussed. He announced this week that he would be leaving Twitter after he started a Patreon which wasn't successful enough for him to justify his continued time investment. Mind you, Nibel was doing fantastic coverage for years without ever earning a dime. To quote his Patreon post, quote, "I've miscalculated the value of my Twitter activity and realized that it's nothing worth supporting by itself for the vast majority of people. It is not me who is popular, but it is the work that is useful. It is not valuable by itself, but a comfortable time saver, and I get that now," end quote. Now listen, I don't know if Nibel watches this show, I suspect not, but regardless, I want to say this. Nibel is wrong when he says that his work was just a comfortable time saver. It was more than that. Anyone that followed him knew that they were getting fantastic, timely, well-curated coverage of the games industry. He was not just copy and pasting stuff, he really knew what should and should not be surfaced. And that is a true skill, and many people valued that. Nibel, I really hope you reconsider. I hope you come back to Twitter because it's pretty shit at the best of times, but it's way more shit without you around feeding us things to get either excited or mad about. That wasn't all we lost this week though. I mean, did you hear about the Witcher TV show situation? Holy shit, this is bad. This week, the official Twitter handle for the show tweeted out the following, quote, "It's official, The Witcher is returning for season 4 and Henry Cavill will be handing his swords to Liam Hemsworth as the new Geralt of Rivia after season 3. Welcome to the Witcher family, Liam Hemsworth," end quote. Oh man, talk about a downgrade. And look, I'm sure Liam's a very nice guy. He's Australian, so that helps. I wish him all the best. But Henry Cavill is Geralt, the same way that Doug Cockle is Geralt, the voice actor from the game. You can't just replace someone that seems so poured into the role. Hell, Henry Cavill read the Witcher books and regularly gave advice to the writing staff and showrunners about how to make it better. This dude nearly missed his audition to play Superman because he was playing World of Warcraft. He built his own PC. He just like me, for real. Only buff and attractive. People actually like him, and he probably smells really good too. As if to soften the blow, CD Projekt Red made a big announcement this week. The original Witcher is getting a remake. The project was alluded to some weeks back when CD Projekt Red outlined their current and planned list of projects for the next decade or so. This one was called Project Canis Majoris, and it was teased to be a standalone RPG set in the Witcher universe. It doesn't get much more Witcher universe than The Witcher 1, I guess. The only things we know for now is that it's being made in Unreal Engine 5, so it's going to look great, and it's being developed by Polish studio Fool's Theory, a studio comprised of many former CD Projekt Red staff, including some who worked on the original Witcher game. I'm very excited about this actually. We don't need a remake for The Last of Us. We certainly don't need one for Horizon Zero Dawn, as has been rumored. We need one for games that have aged poorly, that have at their heart unrealized potential. We need a Soul Reaver remake, damn it, how many times do I need to say it? I'm also just assuming that Doug Cockle comes back to voice the role, and I'm just so happy to know that we'll be hearing more of his gravelly voice soon. CD Projekt Red, don't you dare recast him. If we end up with Luke Hemsworth in the role, I'm gonna be pissed. Circling back to Netflix briefly, they've made their aspirations to enter the gaming market pretty clear. That ambition reached a whole other level this week when their VP of Gaming, Mike Verdu, announced that Netflix was seriously exploring a cloud gaming offering. Quote, "It's a value add. We're not asking you to subscribe as a console replacement, it's a completely different business model. The hope is over time, it just becomes this very natural way to play games wherever you are," end quote. This would be a pretty big deal for Netflix. A newly spun up cloud gaming platform does fit with Netflix's overall approach to content. I mean, we call Game Pass Netflix for gaming, right? But it would also come soon after the collapse of Stadia, proving that not even the unlimited resources of Google can buy you a ticket into the competitive gaming landscape. Amazon are trying to do it right now with Luna, but there doesn't seem to be much momentum behind that at all. While stuff like xCloud and Nvidia GeForce Now seem to have carved out a niche, but they're hardly mainstream. Netflix are already offering mobile games if you access Netflix on your phone, so it'll be a pretty big step up from that. Risky business, but with the subscriber base and revenue declining so rapidly, I guess they got to make some big plays to stay in the game, pun intended. Speaking of risky plays, there are a few things that make me more aroused than seeing Facebook lose billions and billions of dollars on Zuckerberg's attempts to build a metaverse. Faced with an aging audience, declining user numbers, and a total dearth of compelling content in his once world-leading social network, Zuckerberg did what any CEO would do. Ignore all of that stuff and just indulge in a bit of megalomania, dumping billions and billions of dollars into a suite of efforts designed to stand up a Ready Player One style metaverse where people would work, learn, play, and socialize. Facebook's quarterly losses on metaverse-related initiatives is somewhere in the vicinity of $3 billion. A quarter, with very little in the way of revenue and no sign that the ship will turn around anytime soon. The total cost of this venture should really be measured in stock market value though, and in the 12 months since the Zuck announced his creepy metaverse obsession, the company has lost over $650 billion in market cap, or 70% of the total company value. After a recent earnings call where Facebook announced that it plans for metaverse-related losses to continue, the stock dropped 25% in one day. The hubris of the Zuck's efforts are coming home to roost. We all saw what Facebook eventually became. You're going to tell me that anyone is going to trust that company to build a metaverse that we're going to want to spend time in? Bitch, please. With sustained losses like this, you really have to wonder if the Zuck will be forced out eventually. This whole pivot is so much about him that he's really tied himself to the mast on this one, and I for one would not be at all surprised to see if he went down with the ship. You know who else isn't a fan of the metaverse that Zuck is building? Phil Spencer. Take a listen to this.
The metaverse is, in your definition?
Today I'd say, I'm going to get in trouble when I say this, it's a poorly built video game.
Based Phil, at it again, gotta love it. That's not all Phil's been saying though. He appeared this week on the Same Brain Show and he spoke candidly about his plans for Call of Duty, since that's been a real sticking point for Sony as they try to wrangle concessions out of Microsoft in relation to the potential purchase of Activision Blizzard. Here's what he had to say.
That would be segregating a huge audience of gamers.
Yeah,
so
we're not taking Call of Duty from PlayStation. I know that, which isn't exactly what you asked, but just like punch that one in the nose.
Yes.
That's not our intent. Our intent is not to do that. And as long as there's a PlayStation out there to ship to, our intent is that we'd continue to ship Call of Duty on PlayStation, similar to what we've done with Minecraft since we've owned that.
These comments are his clearest statement yet about Microsoft's intentions for Call of Duty should the merger go through. He has said stuff similar to this in the past, but never in such pointed terms. It should be noted though that this doesn't line up with claims made by Jim Ryan, who said that Phil was only going to guarantee COD on PlayStation for around 3 years. Obviously, there's a difference between what Phil says is his intention rather than what he's willing to legally commit to, and I guess that's the rub when it comes to this acquisition, why Sony is fighting so hard to stop it. The other thing that Phil has been talking about lately is the prospect of price hikes. Last week in an interview with the Wall Street Journal, Phil made clear that we can expect the cost of things to go up, but just not yet. Quote, "For us running the business, we have to look at the return on our business, the cost of the business. We've held price on our console, we've held price on games and our subscription. I don't think we'll be able to do that forever. I do think at some point we'll have to raise some prices on certain things, but going into this holiday, we thought it was really important that we maintain the price that we have because consumers right now are much more uncertain than they've been in a long time, and I want our medium of video games to be something that they find attractive," end quote. That was followed up just yesterday with the reveal that Microsoft loses around $100 for the sale of every Xbox Series X and $200 for the sale of every Series S, underscoring just how much of a bargain that little console is, by the way. It's standard practice for console manufacturers to lose money on the sale of a console so they can recoup it elsewhere in software sales or more recently in subscriptions. But with Sony increasing the price of the PS5 and Phil specifically referencing consoles when he talks about potential price hikes in the future, it's not difficult to imagine a situation where Microsoft follows Sony's lead and ups the price on its console. As Marlo Stanfield once said, price of the brick going up. Turning now to some other breaking news, Jason Schreier of Bloomberg is back at it with another scoop, this time on the future of those studios that Square Enix recently sold to Embracer Group. You'll recall that Square sold off most of its Western operations for an absolute steal, with Embracer nabbing Crystal Dynamics, Eidos Montreal, who do Deus Ex and Guardians of the Galaxy, as well as Square Enix Montreal, the team behind mobile games such as Hitman and Lara Croft Go. that third studio recently rebranded, calling itself Anoma. Well, now it's a no more, because sadly Embracer Group have decided to shutter it just months after taking possession of it. The move will affect some 200 workers, some of whom will move over to Eidos Montreal, and others, it seems, are just out on their ass. Embracer said the move is down to a focus on PC and console over mobile, but with the quality of those Go games, it's disappointing that Anoma won't be given the opportunity to make that pivot for themselves. As for Eidos Montreal, Schreier did shed some light on their current workload, and it's a little odd. Apparently, they were working on a new IP which was inspired by Stranger Things, but that has since been canned. They're now working on another new IP, as well as a Deus Ex game. However, that apparently is very, very early in development, so don't expect that anytime soon. The other one they're working on is Fable. Apparently, they're assisting Playground Games with the development of the next Fable game in the same way that Crystal Dynamics is assisting the initiative with Perfect Dark. You gotta wonder if Microsoft wouldn't have ended up purchasing these studios if they hadn't gone all in on that Activision Blizzard acquisition. Interestingly, this is a trend that Matt Booty alluded to when we chatted to him during the FPS podcast this week. In the episode that will go live this weekend, he said that we should expect more of these sorts of collaborative partnerships between studios. He shared a lot more with us as well, including a pretty forthright take on the current state of Halo and where he hopes it'll go next. That episode is live this weekend on the channel and on your podcast platform of choice. I'll leave a link to that below the like button. Circling back to Square Enix for a moment, last week they announced that they were big in Japan, but Japan wasn't big enough for them. In a financial report, Square Enix outlined their overall strategy going forward, saying, quote, "Achieving major growth in the games industry is difficult now for companies that compete primarily in the Japanese market, given its graying demographics. As such, it is critical for our business that we produce hit titles that speak to the global market, which offers greater scale in terms of both customers and sales volume," end quote. Kind of weird then that they would sell their very capable Western operations at a time when they specifically want to have big global successes that appeal to a Western market. But hey, this is a company that's going all in on the blockchain and that is responsible for the Kingdom Hearts storyline, so this is hardly their most baffling move. Speaking of Japan, did you know that Callisto Protocol is basically banned there and won't see a release? The news came this week that the Japanese rating board had denied it a classification on the grounds that it includes dismemberment, which is a weird sort of red line for a country that produces a lot of tentacle porn. Rather than make changes to the game to fit the ratings requirements, developer Striking Distance Studios just cancelled the Japanese release. I sort of understand that decision since dismemberment is so core to how that game works, but I'm also going to guess that pre-order numbers weren't so big in Japan that they would justify the additional development work required to make the game compliant. Not for nothing, but the Striking Distance boss Glenn Schofield is already talking about a sequel for the game. In an interview with Inverse, Schofield says, quote, "I want to make a sequel. This is a complete game, but there's a lot of ideas, cool ideas we want to do next. I always want to keep making the next big thing. Even after I finish a game, I'm already thinking what's next," end quote. Given how much hype there is for this one, so long as they're able to stick the landing, then I expect a sequel is a surefire bet. Important update for Dragon Age. Been a hell of a long time since we've heard anything about that one. This week, BioWare confirmed that Dragon Age Dreadwolf has hit alpha, which can mean a few different things in game dev, but in broad terms, it probably means that the game is feature complete and is most likely playable right the way through. This precedes the beta phase, where you're looking at a product that is largely finished, but for its polish and bug testing. And then, of course, there's the actual release, where thousands of other bugs and issues are identified so they can be patched post-launch. Can we discern an approximate release date from this alpha milestone? No, though it isn't unreasonable to expect that Dreadwolf will land at the back end of 2023, perhaps early 2024. This is, of course, a big one for BioWare. Their last two releases were Mass Effect Andromeda and Anthem. So this team needs a win, and it needs to be big. Let's hope they can deliver, because everyone loves a good BioWare game. It would be a real shame if they were no longer around to make them. Finally, remember that creepy Ikea game I shouted out a while ago? Well, not technically Ikea, of course, but in The Store is Closed, you're trapped in a large furniture store that looks suspiciously like a Swedish purveyor of build-it-yourself furniture, and the management are trying to kill you. Turns out that Swedes don't love this angle, with Ikea sending a cease and desist letter to the game's solo developer. They say that his depiction of the store flies a little too close to Ikea's likeness. Quote, "Your game uses a blue and yellow sign with a Scandinavian name on the store, a blue box-like building, yellow vertical striped shirts identical to those worn by IKEA personnel, a grey path on the floor, furniture that looks like IKEA furniture, and product signage that looks like IKEA signage. All the foregoing immediately suggests that the game takes place in an IKEA store," end quote. Now look, they are not wrong about any of that, but it is still extremely lame of them to call it out, and I personally would buy more IKEA furniture if I knew that they were the sort of company that was cool with game developers setting horror games in their stores. But that's just me. So what got announced or delayed this week? First up, Fallout 4 is getting a next-gen upgrade, or current-gen really. Xbox Series consoles and the PS5 will soon be able to play the new and improved version of the RPG that set the high bar for meaningless dialogue choices. The update will be free and will include a performance mode for a higher frame rate, a fidelity mode for 4K, as well as bug fixes. I think this is the first time I've seen any next-gen upgrade announcement list bug fixes as something to look forward to. Classic Bethesda right there. Wo Long Fallen Dynasty is the next thing out of Team Ninja, makers of Ninja Gaiden and the more recent Nioh series. Great games. Wo Long is to Nioh what Sekiro is to Dark Souls, with more focus on action and relentless aggression rather than RPG or a more varied approach to combat. I played the demo, it was great, and the title just got a release date March 3rd next year, very, very soon after the release of Destiny 2 Lightfall. So yeah, going to be very tricky for me to fit this one into the schedule. Somerville is one to have on your watch list. The creators of Limbo and Inside went their separate ways and spun up their own studios, and this is the fruit of one of them. The blurb reads, quote, "In the wake of a catastrophe, you must find the means to make your family whole again. Somerville is a sci-fi adventure grounded in the intimate repercussions of large-scale conflict," end quote. In terms of art design and presentation, it's very much carrying that Limbo and Inside torch. It's looking great, and it now has a release date November 15th, arriving for PC and Xbox, where it will be a day one Game Pass release. Age of Empires 2 is coming to consoles. I hadn't imagined how this could work with a controller, but someone seems to have not only imagined it, but done it. The Definitive Edition package arrives on Xbox Series consoles on January 31st. Gotta assume that's gonna be on Game Pass. In a similar vein, Age of Mythology is coming back thanks to a remaster. Now, I was actually always more of a Mythology guy rather than an Empires guy, so this is awesome news for me. The news came via Twitter, where the official Age of Mythology Twitter handle announced the project, describing it as a definitive edition. It's going to be called Age of Mythology Retold, and there's no release date yet, but you get the feeling it isn't too soon. And finally, one thing you may want to throw a little love at is Stadia Refugee Wavetale. There are a number of former Stadia exclusives that are making the jump to other platforms in the wake of Stadia's collapse, and this is one of them. It's an ocean-themed exploration title that looks quite lovely, and I've heard good things about it. Free from the shackles of Stadia, this one will arrive on all platforms on December 12th, and there's a demo out right now on Steam if you'd like to check that out. So what came out last week? Well, Mountain Blade 2 Bannerfall hit 1.0 last week after a lengthy early access period. This is one of the most renowned medieval combat simulators with plenty of strategy and open world RPG thrown in for good measure. The sequel hasn't been as universally acclaimed as the first one though, with the title sitting at a mostly positive 79% on Steam and a similarly strong 80 on OpenCritic. PC Gamer scored an 80, saying, quote, "Despite some shallow ancillary systems, Bannerlord is the master of medieval warfare," end quote. While IGN were more critical of this one, scoring it a 6 and saying, quote, "A shallow grind of an overworld strategy game threatens to ruin enjoyment of Mountain Blade 2 Bannerlord's unique and sublimely gritty tactical action," end quote. If it's grand strategy that you're after, then perhaps the newly released Victoria 3 will fit the bill, though do mind the gap between critic and user scores. Over on Steam, it's sitting at a mixed 63%, with many of the reviews pointing to missing features versus the previous game, as well as an overall absence of content. Critics, though, have it at a strong 83. Eurogamer recommended this one, saying, quote, "An extraordinarily detailed economy and range of interlinking systems make Victoria 3 a grand strategy to rival some of Paradox's best," end quote. Hard to get a read on this one, but since the strategy community are really hardcore and really dedicated, I'm inclined to look more towards user scores for this one, indicating that Victoria 3 may have needed a little more time in the oven. Star Ocean: The Divine Force is the latest entry in the long-standing JRPG series, a series that's never really hit the mainstream, and this installment looks unlikely to change that. It's at mostly positive 70% on Steam, same thing over on OpenCritic with a fair 72. Push Square pushing out some good stuff lately, like this 6 out of 10 review, quote, "Star Ocean: The Divine Force is like a comfortable pair of JRPG slippers. If you're in the mood for a Japanese role-playing game and you've played all the good ones, then you can rest assured this one is fine. It's okay. It's comfort food. You know the feeling when you just wish Netflix would make another season of Mindhunter and so you end up watching Criminal Minds? That. Only in space," end quote. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 arrived last week, with the campaign being available the week before that for pre-order customers. Now listen, reviews for COD, generally useless. You get some outlets reviewing the single player, others reviewing multiplayer, others doing it together. You get some people saying it's the greatest COD of all time, others saying it's absolute trash. Bottom line, it's only been out for a few days, and for a game like this, you really need to spend more time with the multiplayer to get an accurate read on it. For now though, the general vibe is that the campaign is solid enough, not a series highlight, but not a straight up disappointment either, And the multiplayer, like I said, it's too early to really pass judgment on that, but early reviews do point to a number of technical problems on PC, so you may want to chill for a bit while patches roll through. One game we can get a definitive read on is Bayonetta 3, which launched last week exclusive to the Nintendo Switch, sadly. I say sadly because this is a game that is extremely held back by Nintendo's aging hardware. Characters and enemies look great, the action is very smooth, but the environments you're exploring are garbage tier. A reminder that the Nintendo Switch 2 cannot come soon enough. I reviewed this one, link below the like button, and I recommended it, as did pretty much everyone else. Bayonetta 3 sits at a mighty 89 over on OpenCritic. IGN scored this one a 9, saying, quote, "One of the best combat systems in gaming gets even better with Bayonetta 3. Its story is a bit of a letdown, and its wild action scenes take a toll on the performance in certain spots, but neither of those issues get in the way of Bayonetta 3 being a top-shelf action game on the Switch," end quote. And GameSpot concurred, scoring it a 9, saying, quote, "Bayonetta 3 is a show-stopping spectacle that feels familiar in all the right ways, while also adding mechanics that are sure to delight old and new fans alike," end quote. A great result for Platinum given all of the drama that led to this release. And finally, despite our begging and pleading, Capcom released RE-Verse last week, and it's gone exactly how everyone predicted. It sucks, big time. It's sitting at a mixed 40% on Steam, and there are basically no critic reviews out there at the moment since most outlets refuse to waste their time on it. One site, Rely on Horror, did review it though. Their score? 1 out of 10. Quote, "Just about every aspect of it feels unfinished, lacking polish, or just plain poorly thought out. A chaotic mess at best, a frustratingly broken nightmare at its worst. I'm left with almost nothing to recommend. If you're looking for a way to partner up with your friends as a host of classic Resident Evil heroes in arenas inspired by locations from multiple games in the series, I highly recommend Resident Evil The Mercenaries 3D from 11 years ago," end quote. Man, let's just hope that this is the last multiplayer Resident Evil game Capcom released, because they've been trying to do this forever and it never works. Please let this be the last one. Please. So, what's coming out this week? Well, it's a quiet week actually, a welcome change of pace after the spend orgy that is Broketober, but still a few things on this list worth checking out. First up is The Chant. I'll admit, I haven't been keeping a close eye on this one, but a few friends who are into horror games definitely have. This is on their radar, they're excited for it. It's a third-person survival horror set on an island hosting a spiritual retreat. Spoiler alert, it's a cult, and double spoiler alert, the cult is weird. Very weird. This one looks a little rough around the edges, but that's never stopped a horror title from being great. If this floats your boat, then it hits all platforms, bar the Switch on the 3rd. The Entropy Center is one that I have had on my radar for a while now, and this is looking rad. Think Portal, except instead of portals, it's this time-bending gun, and the gun talks to you. There was a demo up during a recent Steam Next Fest, and people loved that one. Quiet, but very positive buzz behind this, which is always nice to see. It too is hitting all platforms, bar the Switch on the 3rd. WRC Generations is promising to be the most realistic rally simulator ever created. Personally, I don't see how anything could top Sega Rally, but it's been 20 years, so it's possible that some progress has been made since then. WRC Generations lands on all platforms, bar the Switch on the 3rd. From Space looks cute. It's an isometric twin-stick shooter that almost looks a little bit Luigi's Mansion with its art style and its lighting. I shout it out because it's a co-op title, and co-op titles are rare, so if you want to kick back for some mindless fun with a friend or a family member, then this one launches on both PC and the Switch on the 4th. Speaking of co-op on the Switch, It Takes Two arrives for the platform. This was Game of the Year last year at the Game Awards, and everyone was very happy to see it. Just an incredible title bursting with imagination and clever co-op mechanics, a true opus from old mate Joseph Fares. This Switch port arrives on the 4th. Of the 5,000 farming games that have been recently released or will soon release, Harvest Stella is pretty much the only one I'm interested in. This has all the normal farming and village life stuff familiar to the genre, but the world is about to end and you periodically need to fight off existential threats in JRPG-style combat. So it's basically Final Fantasy meets farming, or just that island part of Final Fantasy XIV. This one is exclusive to the Switch and the PC for now, and it drops on the 4th. And finally, Soulstone Survivors releases into early access on the 7th, exclusive to PC for the moment. If you've been following the new Survivors subgenre birthed by Vampire Survivors, you'll have seen that there are about 8 billion Vampire Survivors clones out there. I played a bunch of them, and none of them bring much to the table. Soulstone Survivors is the exception, delivering a perspective shift, 3D visuals, and a host of new upgrades that feel markedly different to what Vampires is doing. I liked my time with the demo. I think this has a bright future ahead of it, and if you want to get on the ground floor, then this is your chance to do it. Just watch out, because these games are very, very, very addictive. One other title drops this week, and I'm very excited for this one, so put this on your radar. Ghostsong is a title I came across a few Steam Next Fests ago, and it was the art style that captured my attention at first. That's little surprise as I'd go on to learn that the solo developer behind it was formerly a comic book artist. He left that career behind to work on this, he worked on his own for a few years, and the result is something that feels a little special. Imagine Metroid fused with the melancholy of Nier Automata, complete with the remains of sentient AI abandoned and driven half-mad by disuse. The small demo I played through was so immediately compelling, narratively, visually, and in its gameplay, that I said it was the best thing I played during the Next Fest, and I'm a little busy right now with God of War, but this one will remain installed on my PC until I get the chance to circle back to it. If you'd like to check it out for yourself, then good news, it's coming to Game Pass, doesn't get much easier or cheaper than that, and if you'd like to purchase it, then it's also hitting all platforms bar the Switch on the 4th. I've left a link to it over on my Steam Curator page, which also has links to all of the other Put This On Your Radar stuff I've recently covered. You'll find a link to all of that below the like button. Sort of free stuff time now, and this is the first week of the month, which means we have a hell of a lot to cover. First up is Epic, who right now are getting into the spooky season by offering Saturnalia, which is a horror game inspired by Italian folklore. Really interesting art style on that one. The other one is Warhammer 40k Mechanicus, one of the few good Warhammer games. Both of these disappear on the 4th though, replaced by two other titles. The first is Filament, which is a cable-based puzzle adventure, not unlike The Last of Us Part 2, I guess. The other is Rising Storm Vietnam 2, a game about a gruesome conflict where scores of people needlessly died. Not unlike The Last of Us Part 2, I guess. What about Twitch Prime? Well, if you sub to Amazon Prime or Twitch Prime, by the way, they are the same thing, then you get a handful of free games this month. Major callouts include WRC 9 to get you in the mood for that WRC Generations release, I guess. Classic LucasArts adventure title Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade is in there. Can you believe that was released back in 1989? Jesus. Anyway, the other thing to shout out is Fallout New Vegas. I'm sure that everyone who has wanted to play this has already played it, but if you are the exception to the rule, then it is your lucky day. How about PS Plus? The sort of free titles in their basic tier was confirmed this week, and it's a great lineup, headlined by none other than Neo 2. I mentioned these games earlier in the show. Awesome Souls-like with some of the best combat across any action game, full stop. The game's structure makes them more similar to something like Monster Hunter, funnily enough. This version of Neo 2 will work on both PS4 and PS5, and it will hopefully drum up some interest in Wolong releasing this coming March. Outside of that, Lego Harry Potter is in there, we all know what that is. And the other one is Heavenly Bodies, which conjures up images of those hentai games on Steam, but it's not. It's one of those QWOP-like physics games where you have to awkwardly control a human being as they try and maintain a space station. Nice premise, looks funny, and it's co-op, which is nice. Hot off the presses, the latest Game Pass refresh is here, and it's low-key awesome, by the way. No AAA blockbusters, but just a shit ton of top-tier smaller titles. For example, Monkey Island. Its Switch and PC exclusive period will wrap up on November 8th, and it will be available on PS5 and Xbox Series console where you can grab it on Game Pass. Ghostsong is that indie title I shouted out earlier. Pentiment is that historical murder mystery from Obsidian launching on the 15th. Somerville we shouted out earlier. And Game of the Year 2022 Vampire Survivors arrives on Game Pass. Next week's comment section is just going to be awash with people declaring their crippling addiction to this game and blaming me for it. I'm excited for that. You're welcome. I saved the best for last, people. Games with Gold is here. My God, what a lineup this week. You'll scarcely believe it. Get ready for Praetorians HD Remaster, a remaster of an RTS released back in 2003, as well as Dead End Job, which I've never heard of before, but apparently it's a co-op twin-stick shooter set in a Ren and Stimpy-inspired cartoon world. Games with Gold, it's still here for some reason. If anyone knows that reason, please let me know in the comments below because I personally can't figure it out. Our feel-good story for the week takes us to the unlikely world of NASCAR. I will admit that this is a sport I am not well acquainted with. My largest exposure to it has been that South Park episode where Cartman is pretending to be a NASCAR driver and he's like, I'm gonna drive straight and I'm gonna turn left occasionally. That's my understanding of NASCAR. Well, I got my second dose this week, courtesy of Ross Chastain, who when finding himself behind and at risk of elimination from the future round of races or whatever, he pulled out this bad boy.
Chip and Phoenix, take a look at what he did!
I have never seen anything like that before in my life.
The gamers among us will immediately know this move as the old Gran Turismo special, but we were wrong because as Chastain explains it, it was inspired by a different game and a different platform entirely. Take a listen.
Played a lot of NASCAR 2005 on the GameCube with Chad growing up, and you could get away with it. and I never knew if it would actually work.
Well, it did work, Chastain, and now I expect the world of NASCAR will never be the same. Each week it's going to end up looking like a roulette wheel, and we owe it all to NASCAR 2005. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to freak you out, but we are just over 24 hours away from that God of War Ragnarok review dropping. Thursday, 9 a.m. PT, or Friday, 3 a.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time, my review for one of the most anticipated titles of the year will drop. I can tell you that I have finished it, I can tell you that I have a huge amount to say about it, and I can tell you that I will only be saying a fraction of that, because pretty much everything in this game is a spoiler, and I'm very committed to protecting your experience so that you can enjoy the game the same way I did. If you are looking for a truly spoiler-free review, then this is the place for it. Hit the subscribe button, ding the notification bell, and tomorrow, Ragnarok begins. God, I'm so excited. Outside of that, a big thank you to everyone for stopping by. You've been a great audience as always, and a big thank you to this week's sponsor, Squarespace. Alright, so I don't know if any of you are interested in making gaming content or doing games journalism or whatever, but if you are interested in that and you're finding it tough to get a foot in the door somewhere, then can I suggest you start writing? I write about 12,000 words a week, and I feel one of the reasons I've been able to make it on YouTube is because I write, rather than just talking into a microphone. I'm not saying that's the only way to do it, by the way. I mean, most of the biggest YouTubers in any category are doing it unscripted, but writing works for me because it helps me organize my thoughts and it gives me the chance to phrase things exactly how I want them to be phrased. If you're interested in doing any writing but you've got no one to publish you, then maybe think about starting a blog, just a space where you can put your thoughts down on a page, share them with people, maybe even have something to point to if you do ever apply for a job somewhere. If you want to start a blog, then you might want to think about Squarespace. They have an end-to-end blog creation template that guides you through the process of setting up a professional-looking blog, helps you publish and promote your work through both email subscriptions and SEO tools, and they have analytics tools so you'll know which of your content is resonating best with your readers. It's super simple to start up. You don't need any experience whatsoever in building a website, and it just lets you start practicing a craft while putting something out into the world so that you can spark a conversation with others or create opportunities for yourself. As I mentioned earlier, Squarespace are a long-running partner of this channel, 3 years running now actually. I really appreciate that support. Squarespace are helping me turn my passion into a career, and that's what they do for a lot of people, because if you want to turn your passion into a career, then a website is a really good place to start. To get started, visit squarespace.com, and if you really want to get serious, visit squarespace.com/skillup to get 10% off your purchase of a website or a domain name. Thanks Squarespace for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.